Hello, this is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady. I'm a big fan of KISS looms, and I am cooperating with Kelly at KISS to present to you a whole series of looming techniques especially for KISS. We're going to do this on all sorts of KISS looms, so you get to see every basic technique on your own loom. Welcome and enjoy. I'm working on a sweater that has a basket weave design down the center front, outlined by these braided cables, and I thought it would be a good time to show you how to do the braided cable. It looks tricky and it's not, so it's lots of fun. Let's have a look. All of the stitches leading up to the cable are knit stitches, so I'm just going to wrap them and knit them normally. Then the cable is outlined by a pair of purl stitches on each side. So let's go ahead and purl them as we go in line. And this is row 1 of the cable, and actually nothing happens. We just knit these stitches. 4 knit stitches outlined by 2 purls on the other side. At this point in the design, I'm up to the neckline, so these cables are running up either side of the neck, and the basket weave between them has been discontinued. Up to now, I was working all the way around with basket weave and then another set of cables. So let's knit off our knit stitches. This is row 1 of this cable. There are 4 rows, each one a little different. Actually, rows 1 and 3 are just the same. In this case, row 1 moves to the right, and it's knit stitches, then a pair of purl stitches on either side of my cable, which is marked by these markers, and these will be the cable stitchers, but on this row they do nothing. Now we're going to make the return row. The purl stitches are still purl stitches. You can purl them in any manner that works for you. For this particular design, I'm happiest with this one. Knit these. Make sure you don't knit overly tightly. I could have made that sentence a little better, couldn't I? Do not knit your cable stitches overly tightly. It will make them very difficult to knit off. These are my outlining purl stitches. These are the rest of the knit stitches, and I'm not going to show you this on camera, but after I've knitted off these stitches, I'll wrap down here and knit those stitches off too, and then come back. But first, we're going to do our row 2 cable cross. The stitches must first be knitted off in the normal way. If you lose your place in this, you can always see what you did last. Last row, well, row before last actually, I crossed there and there. So this row, I only make a single cross of these 2 middle stitches, and this time they go right over left, lifting off both stitches, crossing the one that was on the right to the next peg over, settling it, and the one that was on the left to the next peg over. Now they're crossed. You can see the cross there. It's a little bit tight, but not so tight it damages the yarn or the loom. And we will come back for row 3 in a moment after I finish knitting row 2 around here. Alright, we're ready for row 3. I finished row 2 going that way. I've knitted row 3 with normal knit stitches all the way up to here, and we are now ready to purl the next 2 so as to outline our cable. And actually row 3 is just like row 1. Nothing really happens. We knit it, but we don't make cable crosses on this one. These will be 4 knit stitches when I knit them off, and we end with 2 purl stitches. It does not have to be 2. In this particular yarn, you can probably see how fuzzy it is, and I thought the cable would stand out better outlined by more than 1 purl stitch. But in many instances, you might find that a single column of purl stitches would be adequate. So there we go. Row 3 is completed. Let's start with our 2 purl outline stitches over here. And then we'll do another crossing row on row 4, and that is all that is taking place in this cable, alternately crossing one set of stitches on row 2 and a second set, 2 sets really, on row 4 with plain rows in between. Okay, there are my outline purls completed. Let's go ahead and knit over. And this row will make it very clear why these stitches should not be knitted overly tightly, because this time we're going to cross 2 sets. Last time I crossed the center 2, right one settling first, left one settling second. So on the front it appears as a right over left. Let me see if I can show it to you. There we are. See, that right stitch is going. Now this time we're going to go left over right. It'll be like these two. You saw me lift with my fingers last time. There are other ways to do it, so let's practice with some. I could lift this one up on a separate tool, lay it down, lift my left stitch, cross it, and lift my right stitch, cross it, and settle them down like that. That is more comfortable for some people. Or I could use the pins. Drop it on a pin. Actually, that pin, it would be in the way. Silly me. Drop it on a pin. Lift the left stitch and cross it. Rescue the right stitch from the pin, making sure it is no longer caught, because that creates trouble, as you know, and crossing it. As long as the stitches get crossed in the correct order, it does not matter whether you use your fingertips or 2 tools or a tool and a pin, or if you can do it with a magic wand. I'd like to see it, but feel free. And then we just knit on around to the rest of row 4. I'm going to go ahead and knit row 4 and then come back and we'll do 5 and 6 just to remind you of how it works. Alright, I referred to this a moment ago as row 5. In reality, of course, I've done all this work up the sweater. It's more like 151 where I am, but it's row 5 of the ones you've seen me work. And the pattern is really the first 4 rows repeated and repeated. So in reality, we're back to a row 1. And every row we do the same thing to some extent, in that we purl 2 just to outline our cable. We knit 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we purl 2. This being an odd numbered row, like all the other odd numbered rows, 1, 3, 5, 99, 111, we simply knit over the cable stitches. They don't cross every row, they cross every other row. Now note that although many times I would slip the first stitch, this time I'm outlining a neckline and I'm going to attach a neckband to it eventually, so I actually want every row knitted. It's easier to seam when you do that. 2 purls, 4 knits, 2 purls. Now, the last cross took place on row 4, and we crossed 2 pairs of stitches, these 2. This time we're going to knit over, and remember, if we couldn't quite remember where we were, we could check down here and we can see the 2 crosses most recent. So we want to cross these 2 middle ones, this time going right over left. The last time we went left over right with these. And alternating those 2 things is what gives us the braided looking pattern. we're going to cross the center 2 stitches right over left. Let's use the 2 tool method. I'm going to let that one sit around while I pick up the right stitch, put it to the left, peg, and replace the left one. So this is row 2 going this way. I'm going to go ahead and knit around, knit back, and we'll do rows 3 and 4 of the design. That's rows 7 and 8 that you've seen me knit. Alright, I've knitted back and forth, and now we're ready for another row 3 of the design. This is the 7th row that you have participated in, and it's just like all the other odd-numbered rows, just knits and purls. So while I do it, I'm going to talk a moment about braided cables in general. Here you see me doing 1 over 1, sometimes 2 in one row, sometimes 1 in one row. But they could be 2 over 2 cables if your yarn and the gauge and the particular loom would permit it. That would still be a braided cable. Sometimes you can get as many as 8 or 10 stitches in a braided cable with the various columns of stitches alternating and rotating around between them. So what I'm showing you is not the last word in braided cables. It's a very simple one, and yet you get a very attractive effect. I think that's a very attractive effect. Alright, let us knit another row 4, starting with purl, purl, which is not really part of the cable. However, it is an essential part of the design. You might have noticed that if you put a cable on a plain stockinette background and it's just a vertical run of cable, not what I call a wanderlust cable or a traveling cable that moves all around, that has an effect of its own. But a vertical cable is not as dramatic as you would hope unless you do outline it with purl stitches. So these are integral to the results that we want to get. Here are the 4 cable stitches to be knitted over. Now, each pair, left and right pair, will cross separately. You can see our central cross on the previous row. Well, 2 rows down, actually. And I am going to use the pins as my holding method this time. Let's try moving it really out of the way. There it goes, left and right. Set the stitch on a pin off to the side, cross left over right. And we just keep on alternating row 2 and row 4, with rows 1 and row 3 being normally knitted all the way up the garment, and this is what we get.